am so excited to have Jennifer Kok on the podcast today. Thank you for joining us, Jennifer.
Thank you, Angela. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, fellow podcaster. It's always fun to talk with somebody else who runs a business podcast and who also is like excited about entrepreneurship. So, welcome. And can you give us, before we dive into all the juicy questions, a little background on how you started your entrepreneurial journey?
Sure. So I went off to college and got the sales and marketing degree and started in corporate America, like a lot of us do, and was in that journey for about 10 years. Back then, I worked for Kraft Foods, amazing company, loved it, but you had to keep relocating in order to promote. So my husband and I got married. We moved to Kansas City, we moved to Chicago, and then we had our first child. And when she was about 3 years old, we just thought, okay, this is hard. We don't want to keep moving. And I think, just had that entrepreneur bug. So I decided to buy into a franchise called Cookies by Design. We moved back to Michigan to be closer to family. Well, it turns out I found out I was pregnant with our second daughter. So I thinking, oh, no big deal. We'll make this happen. We'll get the business up and running, and then she'll come a few months later. Well, nothing went like planned, like it usually doesn't for entrepreneurs. And I opened up my business on August 17th, and 2 days later, I delivered my second daughter. I had like 2 employees. It was absolutely ridiculous. And Cookies by Design was a gifting company. So we would deliver these like cookie bouquets. So my husband literally picked me up from the hospital with our newborn baby and 3-year-old and cookie bouquets in the back of the car. So that's how I started my entrepreneur journey. But thankfully, we survived it. And then kind of my story pivoted in 2008, 2009 during the recession, when all of a sudden I'm watching a lot of my business dry up. Because I was in sales and marketing, I did a lot of corporate business.
Mm.
Well, during the recession, that was really struggling. And so I ended up pivoting and adding cupcakes to our brand. I created a brand called Cupcake by Design, and my manager cranked out all the flavors. I did all the branding, and I ended up franchising it. So I was this franchisee who became a franchisor. And then we went on, it tripled my business, honestly. The best thing that ever happened to me was the recession of 08 and 09.
Mm.
Not only did it allow me to learn something new and create a national brand, but it tripled our revenue. And then I went on to own this business together. Cookies by Design, Cupcake by Design was kind of an umbrella of two brands until the fall of 2018. So it really just kind of changed my entrepreneur journey, and it really helped me learn a lot of new things. And yeah, and here I am. So I sold the business to my manager in the fall of 2018, and then the pandemic happened. And as I'm watching these small businesses just flounder, I thought, okay, I have a skill set that can help these people. A pandemic, recession, two different animals, but they're both external threats that were negatively impacting our businesses. So that's when I got into coaching. And that is what I do today, is I work with existing small business, either brick and mortar or service-based. And I really help them focus on how can we scale? How can we be more profitable and be rememberable, is what I say.
I love that. And I love how both really pivotal times in recent memory you kind of use to pivot in a way to help other people and grow. We all can learn something about that. And about the pandemic, I mean, everybody was reconsidering what they were doing and going, maybe I should start that business. Maybe, I mean, I started a business during the pandemic and I was like, the heck with this, And
Exactly.
yeah, and so I love that, and it's so needed because there's so many conceptions about business that are not accurate, and reaching out to a coach to help you is so important and can help you grow and scale so much faster. So I'd really love to hear about your business that you started that became a national brand. And what do you think were some of the key factors in the success of that business?
So I was about 10 years into my journey of owning the business. And I think part of the factors of my first 10 years of success was the fact that I actually delivered a baby 2 days after starting. Because
What do you
from
know?
day one, I had to be queen of delegator.
Mhm. Mm.
And it's really hard for small business owners to delegate. We tend to do all the things inside our four walls, where I didn't have that luxury because I was trying to also raise my children. So I
Mhm.
think that really helped when I look back, the hindsight of that, because
Mhm.
that allowed me to do what I was best at, which was sales and marketing, getting out into my community, networking, and growing. So that
Mhm.
was the first key step. So here I was in a position where I had a strong network.
Mhm.
And the recession happened. And at the time, there was a show called Cupcake Wars hitting
Mhm.
Food Network. So in the bakery business, it can be trendy. There's
Mhm.
always that looking for the next cronut. I don't know if you remember the guy who
Mhm.
did the croissant
Yep.
and the donut.
Mhm. Yep.
And so I think part of the success is being open-minded and being in that position to be innovative.
Mhm.
I had to innovate because my back was up against the wall.
Mhm.
Cash flow was drying up. I was in a place of it's either do or not, or we will not maybe survive. But what if we took on this mindset of innovate before our back is up against the wall? And so I think what helped me was just those key things. I was in a position with a really strong network so that when I launched something new, I had people that I could brand it to, I could sell it to. And then also I had people in place, my staff,
Mhm.
that were able to help me build something like this.
Mhm. And I love that, especially for the mom entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast, because so many times they think I'll wait until the children grow up, or I can't start the business while I have children, especially young children. And if you learn quickly and learn fast that you don't have to do it all, and actually you shouldn't do it all, that you can go ahead and start that business and grow that business to a level that you've always wanted to. So I love that reminder. And those those are just so key in starting and growing your business. But what I really love, and I don't think we've ever had on the podcast, is a local small business advocate like you do. And so I would love for any of the listeners who have a local small business, especially a brick and mortar business. You work with a lot of service based businesses doing that all over the country. What are the challenges are you seeing they're encountering, and maybe some tips to help overcome those?
Well, I have a heart for the local owned business because I believe they're the heart of our communities. These are the folks that hire our children and give and
Mhm.
teach them their first job.
Mhm.
These are the folks that are marching in the 4th of July parade. And especially post pandemic, it is extremely challenging. And the biggest
Mhm.
challenges they are facing, besides inflation and cost and what it takes to operate a business today, is being remembered,
Mhm.
is competing with the big box and the online space, especially. We really grew accustomed to Amazon and getting what we want tomorrow. And those are very hard for a small business owner to, meet those expectations of the customer. So really, I always call it, how can you be remembered and be referred? I think the latest statistic I saw was today's consumers are bombarded with almost up to 10,000 messages in our digital world today.
Mhm. Yeah.
So how can you, as the small business,
Mhm.
stand out to that? You don't have the marketing budget that Target has and Home Depot and all the big box stores. So that's really a challenge, is figuring out how to position yourself so
Mhm.
that you can be remembered and people are going to be motivated to use you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think so often too, it's, I have a service based business, and the connection, business is connection. And people really are longing for that personal touch, that personal service, and they're even willing to pay more for it to you to remember them. So, because everything does seem so impersonal anymore. So, I've found that that is a way to distinguish myself in a crowded market, and where big budgets can advertise all day, but word of mouth, so and so helped me and she was amazing or whatever, can really go a long way to distinguishing yourself. So what would you say to somebody who was nervous about starting a small business that maybe has that brick and mortar component? And they're like, is there space for me? Is there room for me to be successful?
Absolutely. And the beauty of the fact that it is a crowded market
Yeah.
and that consumers are getting 10,000 messages a day in a digital world is that there is room for you too.
Yeah.
You have now the capability to reach more people than ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just being strategic and wise about who you want to reach.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, back to your point, we are longing for connection. We are longing for to be able to trust who we're doing business with. And that is going to happen more in your local market than
Mm-hmm.
that's going to happen online.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if you have a passion for something or a product, a service, or
Yeah.
something that you're seeing a problem, a reoccurring problem that you can help people with, absolutely. It's never too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I hear that over and over, and I love to remind people because look at the bread aisle. There are so many different kinds of bread. Look at the candles that there are, if you're a product person, there's always a way to distinguish yourself. So I don't want you to feel that somebody has already done it because what's special about your business is you. Um,
Exactly. And really, I can't come up with a product lately that is brand new. It's
right.
always somebody taking an idea or something they've seen, but they're making it theirs. They're making it
Mm-hmm.
personal to who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I imagine that a really big component of positioning yourself to stand out is distinguishing yourself as an expert or an authority. So, can you help listeners with some tips on how they can go about doing that?
Yes. And this is really the key element that's going to help you be remembered and be instantly referable. So when I work with my clients, there's three things we look at. How do you position yourself as an expert? There's either you can position yourself in a certain industry.
Hmm.
So for instance, a marketing agency that I'm really familiar with, she's done an amazing job of positioning herself in the uniform industry. So she is helping uniform companies across the country with their marketing. So that is an example of positioning yourself in a certain industry. A second area is in your thought leadership.
Hmm.
And for instance, you had a guest on, Leslie, with Vitaminist brand.
Hmm. Vitamins, yeah.
So she is positioning herself as a thought leader on how families can improve their nutrition.
Hmm.
So that's another way you can be an expert.
Hmm.
And then the third way is an ideal client. Like, who do you want to serve? I have a salon that I worked with, and she positions herself as the gal to go to if you have curly hair. So the more specific you can position yourself, the more people you're going to attract. And I will tell you that this is the number one fear and hurdle that I have to get my clients over because the first reaction all the time is, well, if I do that, I'm alienating this whole crowd of people that can buy from me. How many curly haired women are there really in my demographic of where I live and operate? And you just have to strategically do this. And then you have something you can continue to talk about and educate, and you're going to attract more people and you're going to be remembered. And it's ironic, but it works. You will scale your business by taking this strategy.
Hmm. Yeah, I know it is definitely one of those things that people probably resist the most.
Absolutely. And some of that is they might be too soon in their journey to
Mhm.
know. And that's okay. That is a piece of it. And so I really take my clients through like, let's look at what you are offering, where you're finding success, and where can we find some common denominators that are going to help you make that decision.
Hmm. And I think that that's so true. Sometimes you have to serve some people that aren't your ideal client to really hone in on, ooh, I really liked working with this person, and here, they loved me, I love them. And you find that, and once you do, you can start kind of duplicating their pain points and how you solve their problems. So, yep, I can't second that enough. That's so true. So it's so hard. We talked about not doing everything as a small business owner. It's so hard There's so much to do. And initially, you always have to wear several hats. But how can we begin to find some balance? I don't think there's ever total balance. But what are some tips for small business owners to begin to work less and find more success?
Well, first of all, I think we have to debunk the fact that that we're trying to achieve balance. There's no such thing, like you said. It's a myth.
Unicorn.
It's a myth. To balance, that means 50%, 50% you're in balance. That's not going to happen. And especially as entrepreneurs, small business owners, business life and personal life intertwine.
Right.
They just naturally do. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what I suggest is instead of trying to achieve this balance that's really going to just cause mom guilt and exhaustion, is manage your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
There was a reason that you chose to go into being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether it was freedom or flexibility or more time with your children or whatever that was. And you also have the freedom to decide what type of business you want to build. There's so much societal pressure that just because we start a business, it's got to be big.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of successful businesses out there that are small. I have a client, she does home organizing, and she's a mom. And
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't want to work more than 20 hours a week, but she
Mm-hmm.
still wants to be profitable. So how can we create a business that works for your lifestyle? So that is, you can do that. It's in your power.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to somehow figure out how to not compare ourselves. There are going to be moms out there that are building a lot faster, moms out there that are building a lot slower, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, first of all, that's where it starts, is managing the expectations and really understanding what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's okay if your kids come along with you to an appointment or into work. And I think it's okay if sometimes on a Saturday morning work bleeds into home life, as long as we have boundaries and that we're giving ourselves that time away. But what I can tell you is I have 3 children. My youngest is now 19. And probably the biggest legacy that I've left my children, have provided for my children, is what they have learned from watching me build a business.
Mm-hmm.
They have learned the power of community, customer service, conversation, grit, perseverance,
Mm-hmm.
numbers, data. And a lot of that can't be taught sitting around a dining room table. So I think us moms just have to kind of give ourselves a break and just give yourself some grace and remember why you chose to start this business that you're building.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, even I know people who have started businesses because they were laid off or they had to pivot because of the pandemic or whatnot. But there's always also an opportunity to correct in your business, which is the amazing thing. You get to do that. And like you said, especially if you're used to the corporate world, it's really a mental mindset shift to think that you get to create. So often I see people create businesses with that corporate stress because that's just what they know. And you absolutely get to choose and get to do what you want to do in your business. And if you didn't start out with that clear why, you definitely can do that. And you'll start to see that when your children are stressed or things are feeling really hectic, but you absolutely can take that time to then reevaluate where you're going with your business. So, what are some of the ways that we can, let's say we get dialed in on our ideal client and we have a better sense of the direction of where we want to go, who we want to serve? How can we begin to attract those ideal clients?
I always say that if you want to stop the scroll, be remembered, be found, you have to talk their language.
Mm,
So now that you've got your positioning on what
mhm,
you want to be an expert in, now you need to start solving their problems.
mhm,
And there's this big fear out there that if you solve their problems, they're not going to hire you or they're not going to buy from you. And that is not true. You
mhm,
are going to position yourself as a trustworthy expert. They're going to get to know you, get to like you, and they're going to want to do business with you. So that's the first step. Your blogs, your emails, your social media, your conversations. Don't make it about you, make it about them. add value into their lives, make their lives easier. And then that way you're going to stand out when the time comes for them to need your service.
Mm-hmm. And I always love to remind people that I think there's a statistic that 90% of the people who are watching and observing your content are commenting or liking or sending you an email. I have been so surprised by the people who reach out to me who've been like following me for years or something like that. And they're like, oh, hey, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? So don't always look at like counts or all of those superficial statistics. Know that people are observing what you're doing and people are taking note. So sometimes we have to keep going without that reassurance and reinforcement of people saying, hey, I like your content. But definitely keep doing that.
I love how you say that because that conversation comes up all the time.
Mhm.
Well, I'm following your expert messaging formula and nobody's commenting. But then 6 months down the road, they'll
Mhm.
land their biggest client because that
Mhm.
client's been watching. So
Mhm.
you're right. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things for women who transition out of corporate into entrepreneur is how do we measure ourselves?
Mhm.
We're used to having those metrics,
Mhm.
a boss, a percent raise, a performance review. And now all of a sudden, your win for the day might be the fact that your child didn't fall and hurt themselves and you actually got the one proposal out. So,
Right.
we, as high achieving women, we're always looking forward. And there's a great book out there called The Gap and the Gain. And I can't think
Mhm.
of the author, but it's
Mhm.
all about how we're always focused on the gap.
Mm.
Let's be focused on the gains. What if every day you looked at your day and said, oh, I won here. I had 3 wins. They could be tiny, but that's okay
Mhm.
because that's what's going to build the long game.
Oh, yeah. And then just giving yourself those cognitive reinforcements, that's going to go a long way too, to keeping you going.
Exactly.
So ultimately, I think so much of business is brain hacks,
Mindset.
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Trying to outsmart your brain that has these primal protection mechanisms, but you're just trying to do a YouTube live or not outrun a woolly mammoth. So
Right. And that's where you've got to find a support group too.
Mhm.
That's where mentors come in, coaches, other mompreneurs,
Yeah.
groups, just to kind of remind yourself that you're not in this
Hmm.
alone and you're not the only one going through this today.
That's how this podcast started because I certainly didn't feel good enough. And then I would talk to other people about what I was doing. And they're like, who do you think you are? I couldn't do that. And I'm like, what is this? We keep little people alive. We keep our families going, yet we can't find a moment to feel good enough to start a business and pursue our dreams. And so let's talk about that. But no, it is so important. So, but like we were talking about finding those ways to communicate with our ideal clients, what are some specific ways that we can engage in our communities if somebody is a small business owner and they really want to distinguish themselves in their community?
Well, you said it earlier. It really is the relationships that you're building, your network that you're building. So if you are in a position where you have daycare and you're able to get out, I highly recommend getting into industry groups. That's your ideal, niche or your position of expertise. Get involved in your local chambers, just have conversations with other business owners
Mhm.
because even if they don't need your service, they probably know somebody who does.
Mm.
And now you're building that relationship and you're able to kind of express yourself. But I always say go into those adding more value than you get.
Mhm.
A lot of times there's this notion I'm going to go to a networking event and I'm just going to collect, collect, collect. Well, you need to also initiate connections, be known as that super connector.
Mhm.
And also, this can happen everywhere you go. This can happen at your PTA meetings. This can happen when you're volunteering at school. If you are volunteering in local organizations, you might not go leading in trying to sell your business, but you're cultivating relationships.
Mhm.
Eventually, they're going to ask what you're doing. And eventually, they're probably going to know somebody who needs your service or your product. So
Mhm.
I think you have to get uncomfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that networking can be very intimidating,
Mm-hmm.
especially somebody who started a business or, feels like all they're doing is at home, we will spit up on them. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard for them to put on the professional face and head out the door because they are pulled in so many directions. But start small. It's okay to not be at everything. That's something I learned too when I first started my business. I think I joined like 10 organizations. Well, that was ridiculous. I couldn't keep up with it. And if you don't put into it, you're not going to get anything out of it. So start with one. And I
Mm-hmm.
always tell my clients, go test them out. They should, if they don't allow you to come as a guest a couple of times, then that's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
So go be a guest, go see what's out there, but do try to find a couple of really strong communities of business owners,
Mm-hmm.
or when you're out and about volunteering in your normal life, don't overlook that as well. That's a
Mm-hmm.
great time to share with people what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think Eventbrite is a really great resource for somebody to go to find local events. And like, let's say if you're struggling with childcare, you can even, they have virtual events you can go to and alumni networking. People don't think about that sometimes. And so that's another way that you can really network, especially if you live near where you went to college. A lot of us don't
Right.
anymore, but there are so many alumni networking events that oftentimes virtual too. So that's really helpful.
And
Well,
there's a lot of mom groups too, like
oh,
Facebook groups. There's a lot of mom in business Facebook
yeah.
groups, which are a great way too. But I
Hmm.
would encourage you to not just stay behind the computer, to try
Hmm.
to also get out there
Yeah,
face to face.
and all of those are, see what you like, see what fits for you. Because I've had people be like, "Yeah, I joined this group," and you know, you don't have to stay a member of it. You don't.
Exactly. You get to pivot when you want to.
Right, exactly. So I know we're running up a little bit against time, but I'd love to talk about your podcast as well. So tell listeners about that.
So I started a podcast a few months ago called Main Street Success Stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose is to interview small business owners, whether they are brick and mortar or whether they're service based,
Mm-hmm.
and to just hear about their journey.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn from each other. And I love sharing their stories. And some of them, they will talk about the failures they had and how they overcame them.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them will talk about how they scaled their business really large.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed one gal, she's the third generation CEO of a family business. So there's always a lot of dynamics that come into owning a business, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what stage you are. And the purpose of the podcast is just for us to learn from each other, but also really just inspire.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the power of owning a business, especially for a mom, because it did allow me to have freedom and flexibility. And I've met so many wonderful people. And the statistics are tough. One out of two businesses fail before year 5. Well, I usually say they quit. And they quit because of some of the things that you and I have been talking about. So when you can, fill your mind with some inspiration and hear from others that you're not alone, that they've been there too, that
Mm-hmm.
really helps you kind of just keep going.
No, I love it. It's, we definitely need that community and to be reminded because it can feel so lonely. There is a small percentage of people who want to be entrepreneurs, and then an even smaller percentage who have the ability to, get through all of their fears and actually start that business. So, there's definitely a need for that. So, if you wanted to give a takeaway or takeaways to listeners today, what do you think that would be?
I would say that if you've owned a business, remember your why. There was a reason you chose to do that. Embrace that and really decide what type of business you want to build, and that it's
Mhm.
okay if it's small and it's okay if it's large. And then don't be afraid of niching down. I know that's a topic that we hear all the time, but for some reason it is a block for entrepreneurs to overcome. But trust me, you want a business that's simpler and manageable, and it's going to be if you can really figure out who your target audience is.
Yeah. And when you serve the people you want to serve and they love what you do, it almost seems effortless. So
And
definitely can't
exact,
encourage you to do that enough.
right. And it brings joy. When you're working with
Right.
the people you want to work with, that is what brings joy to your business.
And a lot of fulfillment, which is like probably feeds the joy. Jennifer, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I'm sure listeners are going to want to connect with you. And where can they do that?
The best way is to go to my website, Next Wave Business Coaching, and you can always connect with me there. And also LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Jennifer Owens Kok, and the last name is Kok. And if they send me a DM that they heard me on your podcast, I have a free 30-minute strategy session for them.
Awesome.
And
I
I would
love
love
it.
to help them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a very generous offer. So, thank you so much again for being on the podcast. And I hope that listeners learned a lot from you today because I had so many great tips. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.